We are back at our college fantasy football ranking series. No, we did not forget about the tight ends. We had to take a brief break for some wisdom teeth surgery on my part. Now we are back into it here, and we're talking tight ends. And it's important, John, that folks know we didn't just skip over this group, right? Because the tight end position, a lot of the times, you could fade it early, forget about it. If you miss on tight end, it's hard, man. If you're taking a goose egg or you're taking under 5 points a week at that tight end position, it really does hamper your roster. So we have our top 12 tight ends here to go through in this episode, and it's going to be really key that you are able to nail these guys down. But John, I'm excited before we get into our top 12 rankings here. And we're going through your rankings here. What I'm really excited about is that since our last rankings video, we now have me and John's consensus full, not just Power 4, our consensus full college fantasy football rankings available over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. So you can go on there. We have our top 50 for every position. I think we actually go 70 deep at running back and wide receiver. It's college fantasy football draft time. You really should be taking advantage of these rankings. I'm really excited about them. And I'm really excited, John, to get into our first tier of tight ends here. I'm calling this group the proof of concept, either with the player themselves or with the spot in the offense here. And we're going to start with the player themselves because, John, I noticed when we put together that consensus rankings I talked about, both me and you are higher on RJ Maryland out of SMU than consensus out there and also just ADP in general. So what makes you so confident about RJ Maryland?
Matt, the concern is the injuries that he's coming off of. And basically in a large CFB college fantasy football draft with 132 teams available, he's basically a freebie or a waiver wire. However, when you're in a large tournament like this competing with hundreds of people, Matt, you've got to shoot for upside. And I think people are overlooking the potential. And I understand, Matt, it's very difficult to get information on this young man's injury. There has been a little glimpses, like spring practices and little tidbits of him working out, but we still don't have a deadline. So training camp's going to matter. But Matt, the ceiling is exceptionally high. And in a tournament, sometimes you have to go for that. He's the son of the former Miami Hurricane and Dallas Cowboys defensive tackle Russell Maryland, who was the first overall pick in the 1991 draft. And Maryland was a 4-star recruit in high school and the number 17 tight end in the country coming out. He also ran track in high school. Last year, he appeared in 7 games and he started 5 before getting injured. 24 receptions for 359 yards and 4 touchdowns. And against Nevada, he had a season-high 8 catches and 162 yards. Matt, that's a tremendous ceiling. The only thing that I regret, that was on August 24th, or as we know it is week 0. So he didn't count in our tournaments or my best ball leagues. And in 2023, if you go back the year before, he was second on the team in receptions with 34, receiving yards with 518, and receptions per game. He averaged 15.2 yards per catch, Matt, and he tied for the team's touchdown lead with 7 receptions on touchdowns. He was all AAC first team, even as a freshman, Matt, in 2022. 28 catches, 296 yards, and 6 scores. He's 6'4", 237 pounds. He's a little bit of a tweener, Matt, but I do like RJ Maryland if he gets back on the field. And right now, Matt, he's basically a freebie in drafts.
Yeah, I know we talk about RJ Maryland consistently. Early last season, we were pushing him as a waiver wire type guy. I just think that you have to, you can't project injury, right? And I understand why folks would back off of him, but you can't project injury. And at his cost, I think he's a really nice pick. And I think he had to slide into our top 12 here. The next one is Elijah Lofton out of Miami. And this one, I don't know. I'm still just a little hesitant on this. The proof of concept is with the offense, right? He's going to plug into the Elijah Arroyo role. That's a lot of vacated targets. And then you also have Carson Beck, right, coming into Miami. He loved his tight end at Georgia with Brock Bowers. So I understand, but you're taking a bit of a leap of faith, right, if you're drafting Lofton.
Oh, there is without question a leap of faith. And if Matt and I can convey one important thing to the viewers, the tight end position is a Gordian knot, everyone. You're going to have to dumpster dive and take high risks, or you draft a high end player. Lofton, 6'3", 230-pound sophomore. He was one of the nation's top ranked recruits in high school at the position. He was a 4-star prospect. He was among the top 15 in the nation nationally, and he was the top rated in the state of Nevada. He also was selected to play in the Under Armour All-American game and the Polynesian Bowl. As a senior, Matt, 29 catches, 594 yards, and 10 touchdowns in 2023. Last year, he saw action in all 13 games as a true freshman. That's very nice. We like when these freshmen get a lot of playing time. He did only catch 9 passes for 150 yards with a touchdown, but you mentioned it. He was playing behind Elijah Arroyo, who is now in the NFL. He also played a key role on special teams. Matt, it is a risky draft pick, but this position gets pretty kind of barren quickly. I do like him in this year's draft.
All right, our last proof of concept here to round out tier 4 is Tanner Kozoil, who's had a weird offseason, right? So he's a former Ball State tight end, 94 receptions last year, 839 yards, 8 touchdowns playing in the MAC, enters the transfer portal, goes to Wisconsin. Everybody figures, perfect, that makes sense, right? Good tight end, transfers to Wisconsin. Gets into spring ball, re-enters the transfer portal. He's now playing for Houston, which from a fantasy perspective, right, as long as everything's kind of sorted out about that weirdness, he's in a lower level of competition, right, week in and week out. And, Connor Wegman, not the worst quarterback at Houston to have paired up. Not really any other major receiving threats to pull significant targets from him. It's a bit funky, but I'm drafting. I'm getting some good exposure here.
The ceiling is there, Matt, for this young man. Now, we do know in general, going from the G5 to a Power 4 program can be challenging, but he did dominate at the G4. He wasn't just good, he was great in high school. He was a 3-star recruit in the class of 2021. He actually played wide receiver at 6'6", 230 pounds. And he was the number 264th player at the position. He would end up transitioning to tight end at Ball State. You mentioned, Matt, he was second team All-MAC last year for the Cardinals. He was great, 94 catches, 839 yards, and 8 touchdowns, averaging nearly 70 receiving yards per game. In 2023, he caught 34 passes for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it is a strange journey, and I actually still had him listed at Wisconsin because he literally just transferred over to Houston in the spring. He goes to Wisconsin in December 2024, and then he re-enters the portal in the spring, and he ends up with Houston. I do like the Houston landing spot better from a fantasy perspective. I think there are more shootouts in the Big 12, and Connor Wegman can be a serviceable quarterback if he stays on the field for the Cougars, Matt.
All right, let's get into our next tier here, John. Shoot for upside. We're going to go through 4 tight ends here who could absolutely put it together. They could put it together and have, top 3, top 5 scoring potential. And so let's start here with Jack Velling out of Michigan State. 36 receptions for 411 yards last season, 1 touchdown in 2024. The interesting part is you go back to 2023, 8 touchdowns. So with fewer receptions. So if you could put those 2 things together, we're cooking.
Hey, Jack Velling definitely is shooting for upside here. And if everyone doesn't know, he started at Oregon State at Cornwallis. and he moved to East Lansing, Michigan to play for the Spartans. And he went there with his coach, Jonathan Smith. And during his 2 seasons as a Beaver, he had 45 receptions for 719 yards and 11 touchdowns. He averaged 16 yards per catch, Matt. And I was really excited when he went to Michigan State. Unfortunately, he just did not live up to my expectations. And he basically had an up and down season. But you are right. He set a career high with those catches, but he averaged only 11.4 yards per catch. And that one touchdown just torpedoed fantasy managers. But, I'm looking at the Spartans this year. They upgraded the offensive line in the offseason. It is much better. And they expect more production from their second-year starter, Aiden Childs, throwing the football. I like Jack Velling at his current ADP, Matt. It is shooting for upside, but I do think he's going to have a better season. And we know touchdowns are fickle. So maybe he ends up with 6 or 7 this year.
All right, next up here, number 8 is Luke Reynolds out of Penn State. He is taking over that Tyler Warren role, which probably isn't fair, right? There is not really a Tyler Warren role, but let's even call it the Theo Johnson role, maybe Theo Johnson plus. If he steps into that role, then there's going to be significant volume for him. You have a Penn State team that is returning Drew Allar. They've got good returning experience on the offensive line. Both of their running backs are coming back and starting. But it seems like the receivers is still, of course, like every year at Penn State, that's what's shaking out. They did bring in Pena, right? But plenty of targets still left. And the idea is that former 5-star tight end Luke Reynolds could be ready to step up and take on that role. So, John, what's the argument for Reynolds here other than the fact he's a former 5-star recruit from our home state of Connecticut?
You got to bet on systems and schemes in college fantasy football, especially with the turnover for these young men. And Penn State is basically tight end you over the last decade, Matt. Mike Gesicki, Pat Freiermuth, Johnson, and Warren have all been productive. So what does that tell me? The coaching staff can identify talent at the position, and they coach it up. And you mentioned it, their wide receivers aren't very good. So the tight ends get peppered with targets. And Luke Reynolds is now atop the depth chart at State College. You mentioned it. He attended Cheshire Academy in Connecticut, which is about 25 minutes from my house, everyone. He was a 5-star recruit. He was the number 1 player in the state of Connecticut. And obviously, we're not a state that produces a lot of NFL level, high level college talent. But when you're at the top of any state, it's interesting. As a senior in 2023, he had 48 catches for 754 yards and 9 touchdowns. He averaged almost 16 yards per catch in high school, Matt. He earned tickets to the Under Armour All-American Game and Adidas All-American Bowl. That's impressive for a young man, especially from Connecticut. You talked about his 5-star rating. He was also a 2-sport athlete, having lettered in basketball for 3 seasons. 6'4", 250 pounds, Matt. And as a true freshman last year, he had 9 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown. The reports are glowing from newspapers out in the Penn State area. I like what I see of the young man. I think he's great in this tier.
All right, next up here, number 7 is Max Clare. Clare, former tight end for Purdue, 6'4", 240. Last year for the Boilermakers, 51 receptions for 685 yards and 4 touchdowns. And now he plugs into the Ohio State system, which is always friendly to the tight end position. One thing I like about Claire's situation as well, John, anytime I've got a young quarterback, I like the idea of the blanket, right? The safety net tight end underneath.
Matt, if you were not watching Purdue football last year, I don't blame anyone who's watching this. The Boilermakers finished 1-11, and the offense finished among the bottom 5 teams in nearly every category. This what makes Max Clare's production even more amazing, Matt. He had a team high 51 catches for 685 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the Boilermakers were not good throwing the football. He finished 6th all-time at Purdue in single season receiving yards by a tight end. And the receiving yards were 2nd in the Big Ten and 8th in the FBS at the position. I mean, remember, he finished only behind Tyler Warren. Over the winter, he enters the portal and he signs a conference rival and national champion Ohio State. Here's what I like. I agree with you with the young quarterback, Matt. But also, Coach Ryan Day definitely needed a reliable tight end. And Clear was the highest rated at the position in the transfer portal. So he got the best option at the position. And when you have Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith attacking safeties deep, Matt, with a young quarterback, don't you want that big boy in the middle of the hash marks? I think Max Clear is a screaming value right now at the tight end position.
All right, rounding out this tier here, tier 3, shooting for upside, is North Carolina State Wolfpack tight end Justin Jolie. John, very nice of you to still cover Jolie after he transferred away from your UConn Huskies. What I really like, the stat line's good, right, from last season. 43 receptions, 661 yards, 4 touchdowns. But I led off the episode saying, the tight end position can be so damaging to your lineup if you get somebody, putting up below 5 points, goose egging, that sort of thing. Jolie only had 2 games last season where he scored under 7 fantasy points in a game. And that type of consistency, with the upside to have 16, 17-point weeks, that's valuable.
Oh, without question. I think he's totally overlooked, Matt. And I do think there's room for improvement if the Wolfpack get that passing game a little bit, more productive. What's ironic about this young man is I've seen him on the radar for a long time because he attended Iona Prep School, which isn't really far from where I live, Matt. It's just across the line in New York from Connecticut, and I've actually been there before. And then he enrolled at UConn, so I obviously saw him play for the Huskies. But in 2024, he moved south to play for North Carolina State. And since joining the Wolfpack, he has gained 20-plus pounds. He's now 6'3" and 251 pounds. He's starting to look like a late-round draft pick for his body. Like he might now have the body mass to play or at least be drafted with a big season, Matt. And last year, he had 43 receptions, 661 yards, and 4 touchdowns. What I really like, Matt, looking deeper, he averaged 15.4 yards per catch. I mean, he's productive with the ball in his hands, and they throw the ball to him deep. He was 2nd on the team in catches, and he led the team in yards. I think this young man has a really high ceiling, and in preseason publications right now, he has been named 1st team All-ACC, and 4th team All-American. So he's on the radar. People know who this young man is, and I think he has his best season on campus this year.
All right, I like to hear that. Next up here, tier 2, it's going to be our plug-and-play category. We've got 3 more players to talk about before we get into that top tier. The idea here is that these guys come with a little bit more floor. You can draft them with a little bit more confidence. Let's say round 5, round 6, right? You miss out on the top guys, but you want to be able to, pick up an early tight end. These are the guys you should be targeting here. Starting with Jack Endries, formerly of Cal, 6'4", 240. He's going to be the starting tight end for Texas this year, and should be a really nice plug in there for the Gunnar Helm role. Endries was productive. He had at least 4 receptions a game in 7 out of his 8 games to finish the season last year for Cal. That's a bad offense, folks. He's getting a big upgrade in that way. I think there's some real both receiving yards and touchdown potential for Endries in this Texas offense.
First, I believe in Steve Sarkisian, the coach, and I'm excited about Arch Manning pulling the trigger for this Longhorns offense. And Endries is a near perfect match of talent, scheme, and opportunity for Texas. He's a dynamic chain mover, and he wins in the middle of the field. And Matt, we discussed it on our show. Texas has a lot of interest in wide receivers. I'm not convinced yet we know if they have an alpha dog number one. So I do think there will be opportunities for Endries there as a pass catcher. He was a 3-star prospect, and he was an excellent student, Matt. He received offers from the Ivy League programs and the service academies, but he decided to walk on at Cal. And anyone who doesn't know, Cal is one heck of a school. So he took the best option of football with academics. And he redshirts in 2022. But then he played the past 2 seasons at Berkeley. 91 catches for 1,030 yards, Matt. Averaged 11.3 yards per catch and scored 4 times. Everyone, the Golden Bears have not been a great offense. Put those numbers in context, and they're much more impressive. He also did not waste time in the classroom, Matt. He already has a bachelor's degree in economics after 3 years. This young man knows what he's doing. He made a football decision to move over to Texas. And here's interesting key stats from Pro Football Focus. 33 of his 56 catches went for a first down, and he dropped only 1 pass the entire year last year. Endries is going to be good for Texas, Matt.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Joe Royer is our next tight end here, 6'5", 255 for the Cincinnati Bearcats. 50 receptions, 522 yards, 3 touchdowns last year for Royer. He returns, Sorsby returns, right, for Cincinnati this year. They've got that chemistry. They've got that connection. The expectation here, John, is that he gets an even larger part of this passing offense.
Without question. And I think you have to understand, Matt, when you're looking at this player pool of tight ends, right, it dries up really quick. And I think a floor with a nice ceiling is very important. And Joe Royer started out as a Buckeye at Ohio State. He played for 3 seasons, and he only caught 4 passes for 24 yards. But, Matt, we know that Ohio State locker room is loaded with talent. So I'll give him, it's okay, right? It's not the end of the world that you didn't get on the field for the Buckeyes. But prior to going to college, Matt, he was a consensus 4-star recruit. He was among the top 10 prospects in Ohio, and he collected first-team All-Ohio honors as a senior in 2019. And 2024, when he finally puts on the Bearcats uniform, he took advantage of his opportunities, Matt, and that's what I'd like to see. He's 6'5", 255 pounds. He's a good athlete, and he's a big boy. Like, he can push people around in the run game. He had 50 receptions for 521 yards and 3 touchdowns. Matt, what if we get 7 or 8 touchdowns? He was named first team All Big 12 last year, and he established a new mark in single season for receptions by a tight end at Cincinnati. Matt, I think Royer, like this, I think after Royer and Endries, it gets pretty dangerous. I like Royer a lot here.
All right, but you have Trey'Dez Green just 1 spot higher here out of LSU. I mentioned earlier when we were talking Lofton, whenever it's, a little bit less proven production, I always get a little bit more nervous. If I'm sitting on the clock there, John, I'm looking for my tight end 3. What is it about Trey'Dez Green that I should take him before I take Joe Royer or Jack Endries?
Ceiling. Matt, he's here because he has a higher ceiling than Royer and Endries. Now, unfortunately, he does have a lower floor. That I will completely agree with. But when you're in a large tournament like this, I think ceiling is really important to take home and to get to the playoffs. Remember, in the underdog, you have to finish in the top 2 to get into the playoff round. So I want a tight end with ceiling. And in the Texas Bowl last year, when I watching that game with LSU, Green popped off the screen, Matt. 6 catches for 53 yards and 2 scores. I immediately hit my little cell phone and said, who is this young man? Because he really hadn't done much. And I was like, oh, he's 6'7", 240 pounds. And I thought he was big, right? But you never completely know about defensive backs at the college level, right? But he's massive human being. He has long arms, a big frame, and he's an elite athlete, Matt. He was a two-sport star in high school, playing on the hardwood and the gridiron. He was graded as a 4-star recruit, and he was the top prospect in the state of Louisiana, the number 35 recruit in the country, Matt, and the number 1 tight end in the nation. As a freshman, he played at on the basketball team for the Tigers. But luckily for us football fans, he stepped away from the hoops and he is focused completely on football. Why do I like him even more, Matt? That locker room at wide receiver, and we broke down Garrett Nussmeier earlier in our series. I love Nussmeier, but their wide receivers, they're kind of like this locker room of nice players. I think Des Green might be the best pass catcher on the Tigers, and I'm shooting for ceiling.
All right. Well, as we get into tier 1 here, that's going to be our early options. There's 2 guys we want to highlight. But before we do that, I want to point out that we're going to finish this episode with a very special announcement related to the 2025 College Fantasy Football Kings Classic Tournament, which is an annual tournament made up of college fantasy football experts and analysts from around the country. I'll let John explain it a little bit more when we get into it. But we are going to randomize the draft order live as part of the end of this episode to round out our full college fantasy football Power 4 ranking series episodes here. So before we get into tier 1, just wanted to make sure you knew to stick around for that part of the show and to learn more about the CFF Kings Classic. If you're not familiar with it, we do an awesome live stream every year, thousands of viewers. So it's going to be a really awesome thing to know about early here in June, although it's coming up pretty quick. But as we get into our last tier here, it's a conversation about the players, but it's also a conversation about when, right? And the idea here, or I should say the question here, John, is, when is too early to take the first tight end? What's the appropriate spot? I don't think we need to, be super dramatic about the reveal, right? We're going to talk about Kenyon Sadique out of Oregon. We're going to talk about Eli Sters out of Vanderbilt, right? Those are kind of the consensus top 2 guys. But if we start here with Sadique, what's exciting about him, John? And when are you willing to take him? When are you building out the start of your tight end room in CFF drafts this offseason?
So full FBS, you can get Sadique in about the 5th round. But this is specifically Power 4, and we're looking at these 2 large tournaments, the Underdog and the Tadpole Bowl. Matt, I think he's going to go off in the 3rd round, and I think someone might reach into the 2nd for one of these 2 tight ends. Because when you start to look at the numbers, Matt, and you look at the risk when you get to this position, people are going to identify Sadique and Stowers and say, I probably should get them early. So as a high schooler, Sadique was a consensus 4-star prospect. He was the number 78 player in the country and a top 10 athlete they categorized him as. And as a senior, he collected the Idaho Football Player of the Year and was invited to the U.S. Army Bowl. He concluded his senior year with 62 catches for 1,303 yards and 18 touchdowns. He led his team to 3 state championships, and he competed on the defensive side of the football. When I say he's an athlete, Matt, and he was graded there, watch some of his high school tape. It is just silly how good he is against high school kids. He's an uber athlete and a competitor, and he chose Oregon over many other programs. And in 2023, as a true freshman, he played in all 14 games. And he finished his freshman season by catching his first touchdown in the Frabo Fiesta Bowl. But last year, he had 24 catches for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if you're like myself, you saw him in the Big Ten championship game. And Matt, I was really impressed. I had liked some of the film and some of the game tape. But in that championship game, I said, I think they're beginning to unleash this young man And I hate to say it, I'm really saddened by Evan Stewart. He probably is out for the season, Matt. And when I look at that Oregon depth chart right now, it's a freshman, 5-star recruit. I like the young man, but he's still a freshman, right? And then it's Sadique. I mean, I still think Oregon's going to be a good team. I don't expect them to be as good as last year, but I think, 850, 900 yards is real reasonable project for Sadique.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And let's finish it off here with Eli Sters. In our consensus rankings, John, we both have him as one. That is definitely not, consensus across the industry. So I'm glad we're lined up on this guy. If we're just talking about an awesome athlete, he definitely fits into that category as well, right? 49 receptions last year, 638 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think, a lot of the country fell in love with him in that Alabama game. He really helped the Commodores upset the Crimson Tide. Really excellent player. Excited for him to come back for a final college campaign.
And I also have him number 1, Matt, because I think he has a high ceiling in a tournament, but he also has a higher floor than Sadique, right? We've seen him already produce at a very high level. And last year's first year as a Commodore, he produced career numbers in every category. And he was named first team All SEC, and he was a semifinalist for the John Mackey Award in high school. You mentioned that he's a great athlete, Matt. He played quarterback, and he competed in track and field. He was a 4-star recruit who originally enrolled at Texas A&M, and he played 2 years at College Station as a backup quarterback. But I think he just read the tea leaves that it wasn't going to happen for him at the quarterback position. And in 2023, he transferred to Mexico State, and he moved to tight end. And his first year starting, he had 35 receptions, 366 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also added 29 rushes for 113 yards and 2 scores, earning honorable mention All-Conference USA. And this I couldn't believe when I was looking at his numbers, Matt. He also completed 4 passes for 99 yards and a touchdown. Hey, him and Pavia, the quarterback, were teammates at New Mexico State. They both went to Vanderbilt together. And Matt, they want to have a special season this year. Stowers is my number 1 tight end.
All right. Absolutely fantastic. That does round out our top 12 tight end rankings for college fantasy football, but we are not done with this episode. We're going to jump into our 2025 college fantasy football Kings Classic draft lineup announcement.
As everyone knows, our viewers, they should know, this will be our 5th year broadcasting from the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. It is Saturday morning, August 9th at 10 a.m. We broadcast live. It is really my favorite event of the whole year of all the things that I do. Obviously, my family's number 1, fantasy-wise, right? Fantasy sports. But I love it. I love meeting. We have anywhere between 8 and 10 participants live, hoping to get all 14 out there. But it gives you the draft takes place the 9th. You have about 3 weeks before the season kicks off. So it gives you 14 experts to give you a really good idea about the player pool. We're also raising funds again for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I'll begin that about mid-July for people. It'll be on my X social media all over the place. But Matt, I can't wait for it. And what we wanted to do, I think we've done it every year, in order to get draft order, and so that there's no questions, I don't randomize it on Fantrax. What we do is we're going to do it right here live. We're going to unveil the draft order for everyone. And that way everyone knows they have over a month. I think we're 5 weeks away, maybe 6 weeks away. They'll be able to plan accordingly to where they're drafted.
Absolutely. Well, this is the exciting part too. And if you don't know which analysts are in this year, that's an exciting thing. Like John mentioned, it really is the best of the best around the country in the full industry, representing all the great websites as well. All right, here we go, John. This is live. This is the draft order being randomly generated live here. So we're going to be able to see it. JD Yankee with pick 14. Joe coming in at pick 13. CFF, that's CFF list coming in here at 12. Eric Froton at 11. We'll see how Froton feels about that one. Dwight at 10, representing
still
campus.
alive, Matt.
Yeah, still alive. Mike Bainbridge of CFF site there. Tom Harvey Sports at 8, my fellow Vols fan. Oh, John, this is not rigged. It's not rigged, but it's looking good for it. CFF guys of fantasy points. Natty Chasers, Jared. Oh, we're looking good, John.
Chris of Fantasy Frames. Shane, oh my God, this is crazy.
No, this is going to look rigged.
Are you?
Oh, I swear. I just put it in. I just put it in. We've never picked at the top. I've never picked at the top. I always get the middle or back end of the draft.
I'm going to do it number 1 now. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Wow.
No, this is not rigged. It was Fantasy Nerd site. It's a great site to do randomization. So we will post all of those in the website on Fantrax if some of our co-drafters have not seen the video. But that is the order, everyone. That is a strong group of CFF experts, my friends.
Whoo-wee, man, that is quite a release here, quite a reveal, I should say here. A lot to be excited about for sure here for our college fantasy football Kings Classic draft order release, especially for me and John. But on top of that, our full tight end rankings here. Again, not only this video, if you want the full top 25 tight end rankings, top 70 at every position, both me and John's consensus rankings, you can head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard. The link will be in the episode description, and you're going to get access to that college fantasy football rankings, as well as the Devy rankings, dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, 2025 seasonal projections for NFL, and Discord access, so much more. Make sure to check that out. And we will be back real soon with some more college fantasy football content here. Just because this series is done does not mean we are done. We're going to be with you all summer long, helping you prepare to win those college fantasy football championships.